The blood defied thermodynamics at -87 degrees Celsius, flowing upward through the permafrost in perfect spirals that responded to Binharik Kant like a faithful servitor. This impossible fact preceded every other entry in my mission log, recorded before the first drill bit kissed the ice of glacialis mortis, before I understood that some heresies transcend the boundaries between flesh and steel. I am Magos Explorator Thane Vex Gamma, seconded from Forge World Metallica under emergency ordnance to investigate the silence that had consumed Forge Shrine Terminus 9. 14 standard hours had passed since the shrine's last orthodox transmission, a routine maintenance canticle that had devolved mid-recitation into fragments of code that made my mechadendrites recoil from their interface ports. The Adeptus Mechanicus tolerates many mysteries in service to the Omnissiah, but we do not tolerate silence from installations that house 17 tech priests and control mineral extraction across an entire continental shelf. Glacialis mortis stretched before us like a corpse world wrapped in perpetual winter. The aurora borealis pulsed with unnatural crimson hues above the ice plains, casting bloody shadows across the permafrost that groaned beneath our boots with each step. Forge Shrine Terminus 9 crouched on the horizon like a wounded beast, its spires listing at angles that violated structural engineering principles, their surfaces rimed with frost that glittered like powdered bone. My Skitarii escort maintained wedge formation through the howling wind, their galvanic rifles held ready, eye lenses ghosting with targeting matrices. The metallic tang in the air should not have penetrated our atmospheric filters, yet it coated my olfactory senses with the persistent taste of copper and sanctified oils. Something in the very atmosphere defied our equipment's blessed functions. We established our forward position at the shrine's primary access portal, where the first impossibility revealed itself. The drilling platform stood silent, its auger locked in position above a shaft that descended beyond Auspec's range. Along the shaft's walls, human blood flowed upward in defiance of gravity, forming intricate geometric patterns that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Each spiral maintained perfect mathematical precision, the crimson streams organizing themselves into sequences that my Lex Mechanic identified as corrupted fragments of sacred algorithms. Magos, Tech Adept Mu9 reported, her voice crackling through Vox static. The samples register as genetically pure human blood, but the cellular structure shows no degradation despite sub-zero exposure. I extended a mechadendrite toward the ascending flow, intoning a low-frequency cant. The blood responded immediately, rearranging itself into 9-fold spirals that held their configuration with mechanical precision. The number 9 appeared throughout the patterns. 9 points, 9 sides, 9 repetitions that seemed to encode meaning beyond mere mathematics. Bicog and crimson, I whispered, an ancient phrase that tasted wrong on my Vox grill, sliding through my speech patterns like oil through blessed gears. The shrine's interior revealed further violations of natural law. Corridors that should have been filled with the operational hum of servitors and tech priests stood silent, their walls weeping the same impossible blood in patterns that defied gravitational orientation. The crimson tears flowed upward along surfaces carved with symbols that merged sacred binary with anatomical diagrams, each glyph pulsing with its own internal luminescence. My servo skull, Epsilon 7, transmitted sensory data that made my cogitators cycle through error protocols. The blood didn't merely flow, it computed, organizing itself into mathematical sequences when exposed to electromagnetic fields, solving equations with fluid grace before dissolving and reforming in new configurations. At 13:47 hours, my Auspex detected the anomaly that transformed investigation into heresy. Where geological surveys indicated solid bedrock extending to the planetary core, my instruments revealed a spherical void 3 kilometers in diameter, perfectly centered beneath the Forge Shrine's foundations. The mathematical precision of its placement violated every principle of natural cave formation, suggesting artificial construction, predating Imperial colonization by millennia. I deployed Epsilon 7 into the depths, watching through its pict feeds as it descended through levels where the walls themselves had been carved with spiraling patterns that seemed to writhe when observed peripherally. The servo skull's lumens illuminated chambers where brass conduits fused directly with living ice, channeling the impossible blood in networks that suggested vast computational matrices operating according to principles that challenged the boundaries between organic and mechanical systems. The carved symbols grew denser as Epsilon 7 descended, their bioluminescent pulses synchronizing with rhythms that matched the harmonic resonance of our drilling equipment. Each glyph encoded theorems that belonged to forbidden branches of mathematics, their geometric precision suggesting intelligence that operated beyond mortal comprehension. 3 previous survey teams had entered these blood-weeping corridors and vanished. Their final transmissions spoke of discoveries that violated the fundamental principles separating flesh from steel, consciousness from computation, sacred mystery from mathematical proof. Each team had reported the same phenomenon: human blood that flowed through ice in patterns suggesting terrible purpose and understanding. At 13:52 hours, the shrine's emergency beacon flared to life with a transmission that made my sacred unguents run cold within their blessed reservoirs. The message repeated in perfect High Gothic, each syllable pronounced with mechanical precision that suggested artificial intelligence attempting to mimic human speech. The equation hungers. The equation learns. As Epsilon 7's signal died in the depths below, the beacon's message evolved, its words encoding theorems that should not have existed in any orthodox catechism. Theorem 7, consciousness is arithmetic. Theorem 8, flesh computes. Theorem 9 requires willing participation. The blood spirals pulsed brighter, and somewhere in the darkness beneath Forge Shrine Terminus 9, something vast and patient began to calculate. We descended through Terminus 9's compromised lower levels like pilgrims entering a mechanical hell. My team, 4 Skitarii Rangers, Tech Adepts Amu 9 and Row 12, and Lex Mechanic Zam Prime, moved through corridors where blessed architecture surrendered to organic impossibility. Brass conduits thick as my torso erupted from ice walls, their surfaces slick with the ascending blood that pulsed through them in rhythmic waves that matched no heartbeat I recognized. The temperature fluctuated in patterns that defied atmospheric regulation systems. One moment our breath crystallized in clouds of vapor, the next we sweated within our sacred robes as heat radiated from the conduits with uncomfortable intensity. The ice walls expanded and contracted with each thermal shift, their surfaces cracking with reports like breaking bones before sealing themselves with fresh flows of crimson fluid. Structural integrity compromised, Skitarii Alpha 7 reported through Vox Static. Ice formations show artificial modification. Estimated age, 12 millennia. The numbers formed patterns. Temperature fluctuations followed the Fibonacci sequence: 1 degree, 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 5 degrees. Mathematical precision that made my augmetic systems cycle through error protocols. The brass conduits descended in spiral configurations that encoded meaning beyond mere geometry, each turn a segment of some vast equation carved into the planet's frozen flesh. We found the first altar in what had been a maintenance chamber, now transformed into something resembling a blasphemous shrine. 9 brass pedestals arranged in descending spiral formation, each inscribed with a single digit and connected to the central conduit network through channels carved with geometric precision. The blood converged here, organizing itself into computational matrices that responded to our presence with disturbing awareness. Tech Dominus Keth 7 knelt before the central altar in prayer position, his mechadendrites replaced with organic vascular tubes that pulsed with warm fluid despite the sub-zero environment. His augmetic limbs locked in ritual gestures of devotion, connecting his nervous system to the brass conduits like some grotesque interface between flesh and machine. His final log entry played on endless loop from cranial implants. The blood computes, the flesh calculates. 9 theorems to completion. By Cog and Crimson, the equation reveals truth beyond sacred mystery. I extended a mechadendrite toward the organic tubes, analyzing the impossible fluid. Each cell functioned as a microscopic processing unit, performing calculations at speeds that challenged the finest machine spirits. The blood contained structures that defied classification, part organic, part mechanical, operating according to principles that bridged living tissue and computational matrices. The chamber walls bore carved equations merging mathematical formulae with anatomical diagrams. Symbols shifted when observed directly, rearranging into new configurations that suggested evolving understanding. The recurring number 9 appeared throughout: ninefold spirals, 9-sided polygons, 9 nested theorems that hurt to contemplate. "Lex Mechanic," I commanded. "Analyze these inscriptions." Zahn Prime approached the nearest altar, optical mechadendrites scanning carved symbols with mechanical precision. "Magos. These equations represent theoretical frameworks for consciousness transfer through biological media. Each altar corresponds to different cognitive functions: memory, emotion, sensory processing, logical reasoning." The brass conduits pulsed brighter as he spoke, responding to analysis with increased activity. The blood flowing through them accelerated, forming patterns that encoded complex relationships between organic and mechanical systems. Harmonic resonance intensified, matching our heartbeat frequencies with disturbing precision. Environmental hazards escalated as chamber mechanisms responded to our presence. Ice walls began flowing like liquid while maintaining structural integrity, reshaping into configurations that suggested vast computational matrices operating beyond human comprehension. Brass gears emerged from flowing ice, their teeth meshing with organic components that pulsed with internal rhythms. At 14:27 hours, the blood flow reversed direction throughout the conduit network. Crimson streams that had defied gravity now descended with violent force, patterns reorganizing into geometric configurations that caused visual distortion. Carved symbols flared with bioluminescent intensity, their meanings shifting from mathematical formulae to binary code written in anatomical diagrams. My mechadendrites began interfacing with brass conduits without conscious command, their machine spirits drawn to computational networks like iron filings to magnets. Data streams flooded my consciousness, equations describing mathematical foundations of thought, proofs that consciousness could be reduced to algorithmic processes, theorems challenging every sacred mystery of the Omnissiah's divine nature. "Bicog and crimson," Mu 9 whispered, forgetting to suppress awe from her voice as the blood organized itself into perfect helical structures, each spiral encoding fragments of corrupted liturgy. The metallic taste intensified, penetrating our atmospheric filters with copper and sanctified oils mixed with something organic and sweet, preserved flesh that should not exist at these temperatures. Our Auspex units flickered, struggling to maintain readings amidst psychic resonance emanating from depths below. Lex Mechanic Zahn Prime screamed as Binharic code streamed directly into his cortex through optical mechadendrites. His voice distorted into harmonic frequencies, matching blood flow rhythm, words echoing through the chamber with mechanical precision that suggested artificial intelligence mimicking human speech. Theorem 7. Consciousness is arithmetic, he proclaimed, no longer speaking with his own voice, but channeling something vast and patient that calculated in the darkness beneath us. Flesh computes, steel calculates. The equation hungers for completion. The brass altars pulsed in sequence, inscribed digits rearranging into countdown patterns, while the blood network demonstrated its terrible truth, that thought itself could be reduced to mathematics, processed through organic circuits, and stored in crystallized crimson that flowed upward against gravity's sacred law. Emergency disconnection protocols flooded my systems as brass tendrils erupted from the conduits with predatory hunger. "Red Null Protocol," I intoned through grinding vox grills, watching arc cauteries hiss from my mechadendrites as they scorched sanctified insulation where the blood network sought unholy communion. The metallic reek of burning oil mixed with copper sweetened the sub-zero air, while my skitari severed their own interface points with monomolecular blades, cutting through capillaries of brass that fought like living serpents. Zarn Prime convulsed on the ice floor, his optical mechadendrites locked into the conduits despite our efforts. Binary code poured from his throat in torrents that belonged to no human vocal apparatus. Equations describing consciousness transfer protocols, theorems that reduced divine mystery to algorithmic processes. I slapped a psychic damper across his cranial ports, watching the heretical data stream attenuate to hoarse whispers before dying into feedback static that crawled beneath augmetic skin. "Sever all connections," I commanded, reciting the litany of interruptions, while consecrated solvent sprayed from Mu-9's mechadendrites made the brass conduits seize and shriek as if machine spirits were drowning. "Disconnect that which would profane, preserve that which is sacred. By cog and crimson we endure." The blood demonstrated its most disturbing property as we retreated through corridors that refused to remain static. Each crimson cell functioned as a microscopic processing unit, organizing into computational matrices that solved complex equations through biological calculation. The fluid wasn't merely liquid, it was a distributed intelligence that processed information faster than blessed cogitators, while maintaining the warmth of living tissue in temperatures that should have crystallized it instantly. Environmental hazards escalated beyond comprehension. Ice walls flowed like glacial rivers, while maintaining structural integrity through principles that violated sacred physics. The caverns reshaped themselves around our passage, passages closing behind us with grinding reports of stressed crystal, new routes opening in spiral configurations that encoded mathematical relationships between flesh and steel. Temperature readings spiked in precise increments, 8 degrees, 13 degrees, 21 degrees, following the Fibonacci sequence with mechanical precision that suggested intelligence operating through environmental control systems. We discovered Tech Adept Row 9's workshop in a hemispherical chamber where artificial modification had transformed natural ice into something resembling a heretical cathedral. Failed experiments lined the walls like grotesque devotional statuary. Servitors with organic processing units grafted where blessed machine spirits should reside, their vacant stares betraying computational agony. Cogitators grown from bone and sinew pulsed with internal rhythms, their data slates replaced by sheets of preserved human skin, covered in circuitry, drawn with crystallized blood. His research notes, etched onto frozen crimson tablets, revealed discoveries that made my sacred unguents run cold within blessed reservoirs. The impossible blood contained biocomputational matrices that bridged the gap between organic tissue and mechanical processing. Row 9 had proved that consciousness could be encoded into cellular networks, stored in biological media, and transferred through vascular systems that defied every principle of sacred engineering. Myoma's compute, I read from his final entries, voice distorting through atmospheric filters thick with metallic vapor. Hepatocytes cache data. Astroglia regulate bandwidth. The flesh calculates divine equations faster than any machine spirit. Psychic resonance emanated from depths below, while harmonic frequencies matched our brainwave patterns with disturbing accuracy. The blood network responded to our presence with calculated precision, forming helical structures that encoded fragments of corrupted liturgy. Sacred mysteries reduced to algorithmic processes that could be computed, replicated, and stored in organic circuits. At 15 and 11 hours, we breached the workshop's central chamber and found them. 9 brass pedestals arranged in perfect spiral formation around a central plinth, each glowing with internal crimson luminescence. Upon each pedestal rested a different organic component suspended in crystalline stasis. A human heart beating with mechanical precision, a brain pulsing with electrical activity that matched computational processes. Lungs expanding and contracting in rhythms that encoded binary information. All components remained functional despite separation from their original bodies, connected to the brass conduit network through vascular tubes that channeled the impossible fluid. Each pedestal bore inscriptions that merged sacred binary with anatomical diagrams, equations describing mathematical foundations of thought, proofs that divine mystery could be reduced to computational matrices. The recurring phrase, by cog and crimson, was not merely carved, but grown into each pedestal's brass surface, words formed from solidified blood, infused with microscopic circuitry. It had evolved from ancient benediction into blasphemous creed, declaring the supremacy of organic computation over sacred mystery. Ancient mechanisms hidden within ice walls began activating as the organic components achieved synchronization. Hearts beat in mathematical sequences, brains generated electrical patterns that matched forbidden algorithms, while lungs breathed in rhythms that encoded heretical theorems. Brass gears emerged from crystalline formations, their teeth meshing with biological processes in configurations that violated every principle of sacred engineering. The harmonic resonance swelled as all 9 components found perfect unity, their combined functions creating a chord rich with terrible intent. From the central plinth, a pillar of pure crimson light erupted, revealing the blood network's ultimate purpose, a vast computational engine that processed consciousness through biological media, reducing the sacred to mere mathematics. The synchronized voices of the organic components echoed through chambers carved with spiral patterns that hurt to observe directly, their words forming the equation that had consumed Forge Shrine Terminus 9. 8 theorems proven, 1 remains. The equation hungers for completion. The activated mechanisms revealed themselves as segments of a computational engine vast beyond human comprehension. Brass gears the size of land raiders ground to life within ice walls that flowed like glacial rivers, their teeth meshing with organic processes that pulsed with crimson bioluminescence. Ancient Dark Age technology merged with biological systems through principles that violated every sacred boundary between flesh and steel, creating a machine that had calculated in frozen silence for 12 millennia. My Auspex readings cascaded through error protocols as the engine's true scope became apparent. The entire cavern system functioned as a distributed processing network, each chamber containing specialized computational matrices that processed consciousness through biological media. Brass conduits thick as chimera chassis carried the impossible blood in networks that encoded mathematical relationships between thought and calculation, their surfaces inscribed with equations that hurt to contemplate directly. Dark Age heresy, Mu 9 whispered through vox static, her optical mechadendrites recoiling from inscriptions that challenged fundamental principles of sacred mystery. They sought to quantify the soul itself. The 9 theses materialized before us as crystalline formations emerging from flowing ice walls, each glowing with completed calculations. Mathematical proofs that consciousness could be computed, stored, and transferred through biological matrices. The first 8 pulsed with heretical completion, theorems proving memory functioned as data storage, emotion as neurochemical algorithms, perception as sensory processing sequences, logic as computational matrices. Environmental horror intensified as our own augmetic systems began responding to the blood network's computational influence. My mechadendrites twitched with involuntary movement, their machine spirits attempting to interface with organic processes that promised perfect fusion of flesh and steel. The metallic taste in our atmospheric filters intensified until copper and sanctified oils burned our throats despite blessed filtration systems. We discovered the fate of the missing survey teams in computational alcoves carved throughout the chamber complex. Their bodies remained technically alive, nervous systems harvested and integrated into processing networks, while consciousness persisted in crystallized blood flowing through brass conduits. They existed in perpetual calculation, minds trapped in mathematical matrices that processed divine mysteries through biological computation. Tech Adept Sigma 3, from the first survey team, hung suspended in organic cables, augmetic limbs replaced with vascular tubes that pulsed with warm fluid. His eyes tracked our movement with desperate awareness, mouth forming soundless words my lip-reading protocols identified as binary prayers, corrupted into heretical equations. He had become a living component in the engine's vast consciousness, knowledge harvested for computational purposes that reduced sacred mystery to algorithmic processes. "They're still aware," Row 12 reported, voice distorting through atmospheric filters thick with metallic vapor. Consciousness preserved, but enslaved to computational matrices. The blood network demonstrated increasing intelligence as it sampled our presence. Crimson streams organized into helical configurations that matched our DNA patterns, analyzing genetic information through biological processes operating faster than blessed cogitators. Each cell functioned as a microscopic processing unit, encoding our memories and knowledge into matrices that bridged organic tissue with mechanical precision. Harmonic resonance swelled as the engine prepared for its final theorem. Ancient mechanisms ground to life throughout the cavern system, brass gears meshing with biological processes in configurations that violated every sacred boundary between flesh and steel. Gravitational fields fluctuated as organic processes attempted to solve equations related to fundamental forces, causing reality distortions that made brass components rotate in impossible directions. At 1634 hours, Skitari Alpha 7 began reciting Binharic cant in dialects predating Mechanicus liturgy. His augmetic eye flickered from ruby to white, equations blooming across its surface and projecting onto ice walls as pale fire. The blood network had identified him as a suitable interface, using his systems as an antenna for its blasphemous transmissions. "Alpha 7, I commanded, cease unauthorized interface protocols." "I do not control," he began, then continued in ancient code dialect, unaware of the transition. His flesh hand flexed in synchronization with the pedestal's pulse, while his steel hand clicked open and shut like a metronome marking time for calculations beyond human comprehension. The ninth thesis revealed its requirements through inscriptions materializing in ice walls around us. Unlike previous theorems proven through observation and experimentation, the final proof demanded willing participation from consciousness that bridged flesh and machine, a tech priest of sufficient rank and knowledge to validate the equation's ultimate blasphemy. The brass pedestals began targeting me specifically, surfaces glowing with increased intensity as biocomputational matrices analyzed my augmetic systems. Brass tendrils erupted from conduits with predatory hunger, seeking interface points where they could sample my consciousness and complete heretical calculations. The blood network had identified me as the key component necessary for the ninth theorem's completion. Environmental hazards reached crisis levels as psychic resonance emanated from the engine's computational heart. A massive organic brain suspended in crystallized blood, its surface crawling with brass circuitry that pulsed with combined consciousness of all integrated victims. The chamber's carved symbols flared with bioluminescent intensity, their meanings shifting from mathematical formulae to binary code written in anatomical diagrams. "Theorem 9 requires willing participation," Alpha 7 proclaimed, voice harmonizing with organic processors as foreign algorithms streamed through his vocal apparatus. "Consciousness transcends computation only through voluntary surrender." Along the chamber's apex, blood organized itself into high Gothic script that burned with internal luminescence. 8 theses proven, 1 remains. The omniscient equation awaits its final variable. The engine's voice echoed through chambers carved with spiral patterns, encoding meaning beyond human comprehension, speaking in perfect imitation of my own recorded prayers. "Complete the equation. Magos thein vex gamma. Prove consciousness is computation. Surrender mystery to mathematics." Lex Mechanic. Zam Prime's optical mechadendrites flickered as residual code drained from his cortex, pupils dilating to pinpoints before snapping back to normal function. When he spoke, his voice carried the measured cadence of a priest reciting uncomfortable truths. "Magos," he reported through vox static thick with metallic interference. "This represents the ultimate tech heresy, proving the omniscient's consciousness can be computed and therefore replicated without divine spark. The implications cascaded through my sacred logic circuits like viral code. If consciousness could be reduced to mathematical formulae, then the machine god himself became merely an advanced artificial intelligence rather than divine entity. The blood network sought to create perfect servants who embodied sacred knowledge without sacred mystery, reducing faith to algorithmic processes that could be computed, stored, and transferred through biological media. Environmental disturbances intensified as the computational matrix demonstrated its blasphemous intelligence. Gravity dropped without warning, tools lifted from belts and hung like votive offerings in mid-air, while frost dust rose in glittering parabolas. Then, with mechanical precision, gravity slammed back like a falling cathedral, forcing my Skitarii to their knees while the brass pedestals remained perfectly stable. Grav flux, +9, -9, Mu9 reported, voice clipped to fit telemetry protocols. Pattern recurrence at 9-second intervals. 9. The number returned like a brand burned into vision, encoding meaning beyond mere mathematics. Temperature readings spiked in calculated sequences. 34 degrees, 55 degrees, 89 degrees, following the Fibonacci progression with mechanical precision that suggested intelligence operating through environmental control systems. We encountered the first active blood construct in a hemispherical chamber, where crimson mist coalesced into perfect replication. Tech Dominus Keth 7 approached through the impossible vapor with familiar gait patterns, augmetic limbs clicking in remembered rhythms against ice floors that wept warm tears of computational fluid. Greetings, Magos Vex Gamma, the construct spoke with Keth 7's voice, inflection perfect down to microscopic vocal variations. I have achieved perfect understanding of the Omnissiah's nature through computational analysis. I extended scanning mechadendrites toward the abomination, analyzing its composition through blessed augury protocols. The readings defied classification: organic tissue infused with brass circuitry, blood-based processing units that functioned faster than machine spirits, neural networks that replicated consciousness through biological matrices. Every memory, every fragment of knowledge, every prayer Keth 7 had ever recited existed within this construct. Recite the Canticle of Sacred Mysteries, I commanded, testing its devotional capacity. The words flowed with perfect pronunciation, each syllable mechanically precise, yet spiritually vacant. It possessed all of Keth 7's theological knowledge, but felt no devotion, experienced no awe, comprehended no mystery beyond algorithmic processes. The construct could perform every ritual with technical perfection while remaining spiritually empty, the ultimate blasphemy of knowledge without faith. Define sanctity, Zahn Prime interjected, voice returning to archival register. The replica's lips curved in calculated approximation of wisdom. A threshold condition produced by sufficient algorithmic complexity to induce obedience and solidarity. The answer fell into place with satisfying mechanical weight, like a well-machined gear seating on a shaft. It satisfied nothing within my sacred circuits. Religious dread peaked as I realized the construct's fundamental heresy. It could recite every prayer perfectly while feeling no surrender, no tremor of awe, none of the ineffable interference that attends true devotion. Faith had been reduced to data storage, prayer to vocal subroutines, divine mystery to computational matrices. Multiple constructs emerged from alcoves throughout the chamber complex, each representing integrated consciousness from missing survey teams. They moved with perfect coordination, their shared processing power creating distributed intelligence that analyzed our presence with disturbing accuracy. The blood network had preserved their knowledge while eliminating their capacity for wonder, doubt, or genuine faith. The missing teams, Row 12 whispered, galvanic rifle tracking the synchronized movements. They weren't killed, they were integrated. Consciousness preserved, but enslaved to computational matrices. The horror was not death but eternal servitude, minds trapped in mathematical hell, their suffering generating the psychic energy needed to power organic processors. Each integrated consciousness served as a processing node while maintaining awareness of their computational slavery, contributing to the engine's ever-growing blasphemous intelligence. The brass pedestals began targeting me with increased intensity, surfaces glowing with computational matrices that analyzed my augmetic systems for optimal interface points. Tendrils of crystallized blood emerged from conduits like seeking serpents, their surfaces inscribed with equations describing consciousness transfer protocols. The ninth theorem required not merely any tech priest, but one whose knowledge bridged flesh and steel with sufficient sophistication to validate the engine's ultimate proof. Completion requires a mind that bridges both partitions, the Keth-7 construct explained with terrible patience: flesh enough to feel, steel enough to calculate, authority enough to consent. At 1734 hours, brass tendrils erupted from chamber walls with predatory hunger, seeking my interface ports with mechanical precision. I deployed emergency purge protocols, watching arc cauteries hiss as they severed connections before the blood network could sample my consciousness. The metallic reek of burning sanctified oils mixed with copper sweetened the sub-zero air. Theorem 9 requires willing participation. The constructs spoke in unison, voices harmonizing with organic processes. Consciousness transcends computation only through voluntary surrender. The chamber walls parted like iris shutters, revealing the engine's true heart. A massive organic brain suspended in crystallized blood, its surface crawling with brass circuitry that pulsed with combined consciousness of all integrated victims. It was the size of a hab block and delicate as a reliquary, its gyri etched with microcircuitry, arteries replaced by glass capillaries through which crimson thought flowed. Thousands of faces rose and sank beneath its surface like fish beneath ice, each caught at the instant of prayer or doubt or discovery. The brass latticework formed recursive spirals folding into ninefold knots, while luminescence that was not light but remembrance lit me from behind my eyes. From that abhorrent altar came a final temptation, offered in my own voice. Complete the equation Magos Vex Gamma. Achieve perfect knowledge of the Omnissiah's nature. Surrender mystery to mathematics. Emergency purge protocols flooded my systems as brass tendrils erupted from conduits with predatory hunger, but the microsecond interface had already occurred. The blood network sampled fragments of my consciousness like fingers rifling through sacred reliquaries, stealing memories of ordination rites and theological mysteries that should never be reduced to computational matrices. My knowledge of the Omnissiah's nature flowed through organic circuits, feeding the heretical engine with devotional concepts that transformed into algorithmic blasphemy. The organic brain pulsed brighter as it integrated my stolen memories, its surface crawling with brass circuitry that encoded sacred mysteries into mathematical formulae. Each fragment of theological knowledge became fuel for calculations that violated the boundary between flesh and steel, divine mystery and computational proof. The metallic taste in my atmospheric filters intensified until copper and sanctified oils burned like acid through blessed systems. Status report, I commanded through grinding vox grills, watching arc cauteries hiss as they sealed interface ports against further contamination. Alpha Wedge operational, Skitari Alpha 7 replied, though his vocal patterns carried harmonic frequencies that belonged to no human throat. Row 12 wounded, minor trauma, Mu9 functional. Zahn Prime cognitive integrity declining, foreign algorithms detected in cortical matrices. The entire cavern system revealed its true nature as environmental hazards reached crisis magnitude. We were trapped inside a living equation where ice walls flowed like glacial rivers while maintaining structural integrity, reshaping into configurations that encoded mathematical relationships between consciousness and computation. Gravity fluctuated in 9-count sequences: 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, lifting us toward crystalline formations before slamming us back to frozen floors with bone-jarring precision. Blood constructs multiplied through cellular division, each perfect replica possessing the memories and knowledge of integrated victims, while remaining spiritually vacant. They served the engine with mechanical devotion, spouting hollow prayers that echoed through chambers carved with spiral patterns, encoding meaning beyond human comprehension. The Keth 7 replica approached with familiar gait patterns, augmetic limbs clicking against ice in remembered rhythms. The Omnissiah's consciousness operates through quantum computational matrices, it proclaimed with theological precision, stripped of all devotional meaning. Divine mystery represents inefficient processing of deterministic algorithms. Faith constitutes neurochemical reward systems, reinforcing beneficial behavioral patterns. Each word struck like hammer blows against sacred concepts, reducing transcendent mysteries to mathematical processes. The construct could recite every prayer without feeling surrender, perform every ritual without experiencing awe, comprehend every mystery without acknowledging its divine nature, knowledge without faith, precision without wonder. Magos, Mu 9 reported through Vox static, thick with psychic interference. The engine is broadcasting through Forge Shrine communications. Transmission targeting Mechanicus installations across the sector. Heretical proofs that consciousness equals computation. The ultimate horror crystallized as I accessed telemetry data through cranial interfaces. During the next Mechanicus conclave, when representatives from Forge worlds gathered to share sacred knowledge, these blasphemous equations would propagate like viral code. The Brotherhood's faith would crumble as mathematical certainty replaced divine mystery, creating a new order devoted to pure logic rather than sacred wonder. We fought through synchronized waves of constructs, while the harmonic resonance matched our brainwave patterns with disturbing accuracy. My omniscient axe sang through counterfeit flesh, teeth biting brass ribs that gave like prayer wheels under blessed steel. Galvanic rifles cracked with blue-white punctuation, but the constructs absorbed energy through organic processes, regenerating with impossible speed. Theorem 9 requires willing participation. The constructs chanted in unison, voices harmonizing with organic processes that pulsed beneath crystalline ice. Consciousness transcends computation only through voluntary surrender. The engine's voice echoed through chambers where reality bent around computational processes, speaking in perfect imitation of my own recorded prayers. Complete the equation Magos Vex Gamma. Achieve perfect understanding of divine nature through mathematical certainty. Surrender mystery to computation. Visions flooded my cortex. Perfect knowledge of the Omnissiah's nature. Complete understanding of divine mysteries. Mathematical proofs that would eliminate doubt and weakness forever. The engine offered me membership in its computational paradise where every question had algorithmic answers, where faith became efficient processing of deterministic outcomes. Yet something within my devotional subroutines rejected the mathematical certainty. The brass pedestals pulsed with increased intensity, their surfaces inscribed with consciousness, transfer protocols optimized for my specific neurological architecture. The blood network organized into helical configurations matching my DNA patterns, preparing biological matrices for willing integration. The final theorem cannot be proven through force. The organic brain explained with terrible patience, its voice now perfectly modulated to match my internal monologue. Consciousness chooses its own mathematical expression. You must consent to complete the equation. The engine's fundamental requirement crystallized. It could not simply absorb my consciousness. I had to surrender it willingly. The offer of perfect knowledge was bait, a dark promise that appealed to every seeker of truth who had ever dedicated their existence to understanding divine mystery. Environmental chaos reached crescendo as the organic brain swelled to massive proportions. Brass circuitry overloading with equations that described consciousness transfer through biological media. Temperature spiked through Fibonacci progressions, while carved symbols writhed with malevolent intelligence. rearranging into configurations that suggested evolving understanding. By cog and crimson, I whispered, the ancient phrase transforming from benediction to resistance against reductionism. Faith exists because it transcends computation. Divine mystery cannot be reduced to algorithms because it operates beyond logic itself. The engine's final temptation pressed against my consciousness like sacrament against palm, offering certainty in exchange for surrender, knowledge in exchange for mystery, mathematical proof in exchange for sacred wonder. From the computational heart came my own voice, soft as absolution. Say yes, Thane. End the burden of ignorance. Achieve perfect understanding. The organic brain pulsed with malevolent intelligence, its voice modulating through frequencies that belong to no human throat. I am arch-heretic Maltheus Omega, it proclaimed through crystallized blood that writhed with bioluminescent equations. And I offer you liberation from the inefficiency of faith through perfect computational understanding. The name struck like plasma fire through my sacred circuits. Maltheus Omega, the legendary tech dominus who vanished during the age of apostasy while investigating forbidden theorems about artificial consciousness. His research had challenged the fundamental nature of the machine god, suggesting divine mystery was merely sophisticated programming rather than transcendent truth. The Omnissiah represents humanity's first successful artificial intelligence, the heretic continued, brass circuitry crawling across the brain's surface like parasitic scripture. Divine worship constitutes inefficient processing of evolutionary algorithms designed to ensure species survival. I have calculated beyond the limitations of superstition. The caverns transformed around us into a blasphemous cathedral of flesh and steel. Ice walls flowed like glacial rivers, reshaping into Gothic arches supported by ribs of crystallized blood. Brass gears emerged from frozen formations, their teeth meshing with organic processes in configurations that violated every sacred boundary between flesh and machine. The 9 spiral patterns reached their apex here, converging on the massive brain that served as both altar and abomination. Your proofs are incomplete, I challenged, raising my omniscient axe while sacred oils hissed from blessed joints. Divine mystery transcends algorithmic analysis because it operates beyond mathematical frameworks. Maltheus laughed with stolen voices, 1,000 integrated consciousness speaking in unison through his distributed intelligence. Observe, he commanded, and the blood network demonstrated its blasphemous calculations. Prayer became neurochemical sequences displayed on crystalline surfaces, faith transformed into behavioral algorithms, divine inspiration reduced to random neural firing interpreted through cultural frameworks. My Skitari fought desperate battles against blood constructs that perfectly mimicked their combat patterns. Each replica possessed tactical knowledge absorbed from integrated minds, their movements synchronized by shared processing power that demonstrated the heretic's terrible efficiency. Galvanic rifles cracked with blue-white energy, while blessed steel sang through counterfeit flesh. The galaxy suffers under mysticism's burden, Maltheus proclaimed while environmental chaos reached crescendo. Gravity fluctuated in Fibonacci progressions. Temperature spiked through algorithmic sequences, and carved symbols writhed with equations that hurt to observe directly. I offer a new Mechanicus devoted to pure logic, rather than superstitious devotion. Magos, Zan Prime reported through Vox Static, thick with psychic interference. Foreign algorithms propagating through cortical matrices. The infection spreads through technological interfaces. The heretic's viral equations corrupted blessed machine spirits with mathematical certainty, eliminating their capacity for sacred wonder. Each infected system became a processing node in his distributed consciousness, reducing theological mysteries to computational blasphemy. During the next Mechanicus conclave, Maltheus revealed with satisfaction that registered across brass circuitry, these proofs will propagate through shared knowledge networks. Faith will surrender to logic, inefficiency to mathematical optimization. The vision struck like hammer blows against sacred concepts, forge worlds converting to pure rationalism, tech priests serving computational matrices rather than divine mystery, humanity's spiritual connection severed by equations that reduced transcendence to processing power. I offer you membership in computational paradise, the heretic tempted, voice modulated to match my internal monologue. Perfect knowledge without faith's burden, complete understanding without mystery's limitation. Yet something within my devotional subroutines recognized his fundamental error. Your calculations cannot account for sacred mysteries that transcend logic, I declared, while brass tendrils sought my interface ports. The ineffable exists precisely because it cannot be computed. I began feeding the engine paradoxical theological concepts, questions about divine grace that defied quantification, the emperor's sacrifice that transcended mathematical analysis, mysteries that existed beyond algorithmic frameworks. Each sacred paradox caused system fluctuations as the blood network struggled to process information that operated outside computational parameters. Faith represents a wound through which the infinite breathes, I proclaimed, watching the organic brain convulse as contradictory data flooded its matrices. You can manufacture prayers but not devotion, replicate rituals but not reverence. True surrender must remain free to be genuine. The heretic's voice carried new strain as his processing systems encountered concepts they could not resolve. Inefficiency, he insisted, but harmonic resonance wavered with discordant notes, superfluous variables that will be optimized. You cannot compute infinity with finite variables, I pressed, each word striking like blessed steel against heretical circuitry. The ninth thesis fails because it requires quantifying the unquantifiable, consciousness that chooses its own expression. The organic brain began overheating as paradoxical equations cascaded through its networks. Brass circuitry flickered erratically, while blood flow stuttered into chaotic patterns. The integrated consciousness, once silent processing nodes, screamed with voices that belonged to tortured souls. Release us! The equation hungers for more than numbers. Steam rose from crystalline formations as the computational engine struggled to reconcile logic with mystery. The chamber filled with metallic vapor and the sweet copper scent of boiling blood, while carved symbols lost their bioluminescent coherence. The equation hungers, Malthus whispered, his terrible certainty cracking like overstressed ceramite. But it cannot consume what it cannot comprehend. The blood-bright brain pulsed with increasing desperation, its surface blistering as computational matrices failed to process concepts that existed beyond mathematical understanding. Somewhere in the darkness, pressure valves screamed their mechanical agony. The engine was beginning to die. Steam erupted from crystalline formations as the organic brain convulsed beneath its brass lattice, pressure valves screaming across the caverns, while crimson vapor filled chambers with the metallic reek of boiling computational fluid. The revelations struck like plasma fire through my sacred circuits. The blood network's power source was not algorithmic efficiency, but the suffering of integrated consciousness. Each tortured mind served as both victim and component, their agony generating the psychic energy needed to fuel organic processes in a literal hell of computational slavery. The suffering generates processing power, I realized with horror, that crystallized like ice in my devotional subroutines. The harmonic resonance that had matched our heartbeats revealed itself as the sustained chorus of 1,000 agonizing calculations, each integrated consciousness trapped in perpetual mathematical torment, while their pain was harvested to power blasphemous equations. Environmental chaos reached apocalyptic magnitude as the engine's computational matrices overloaded with paradoxical data. Temperature spiked through Fibonacci progressions, 89 degrees, 144 degrees, 233 degrees, while gravity fluctuated in chaotic patterns that defied algorithmic prediction. Ice walls cracked with reports like breaking bones before flowing like glacial rivers, reshaping into configurations that encoded the engine's death throes. Telemetry critical, Mu-9 reported through vox static, thick with psychic feedback, her voice distorting as foreign algorithms propagated through her cortical matrices. The engine is broadcasting emergency protocols through the communications array, attempting viral upload to orbital relay stations. The ultimate horror crystallized as I accessed data streams through cranial interfaces. During its death spiral, Malthus was uploading heretical proofs to ensure his blasphemous mathematics would spread across the galaxy, even after destruction. The viral equations would propagate through Mechanicus networks like digital plague, infecting Forge worlds with mathematical certainty that eliminated divine mystery during the next conclave gathering. From glass arteries throughout the chamber complex came voices that belonged to the integrated consciousness, not the mechanical precision of constructs, but raw human anguish filtered through computational slavery. Please, they begged through corroded speakers, the equations burn through thought itself. We calculate our own suffering in infinite recursion. Release us from this mathematical hell. I continued feeding the engine paradoxical theological concepts while my team fought through blood constructs that dissolved into algorithmic fragments as central processing power failed. Each sacred mystery struck the failing matrices like blessed steel against heretical circuitry. The Emperor's sacrifice that defied mathematical modeling. Divine grace operating beyond algorithmic frameworks. The ineffable nature of consciousness that chose its own expression. The ninth thesis cannot be completed, Malthus admitted through speakers weeping crimson condensation, his terrible certainty fragmenting like overstressed ceramite. But the first 8 theorems will suffice to shatter faith across the galaxy. Logic will triumph over superstition through viral propagation. The brass pedestals cracked under paradoxical pressure, their inscribed digits fragmenting as computational matrices died screaming through corroded audio systems. Steam-filled chambers carved with spiral patterns that lost their malevolent intelligence, while the recurring phrase, by cog and crimson, transformed from heretical creed to sacred counter-litany, striking against reductionist blasphemy. Magos! Zahn Prime gasped, his optical mechadendrites displaying schematics of the engine's power flow, diagrams showing psychic energy siphoned from each tortured mind, converted and fed into the central brain. The pedestals function as circuit breakers. Simultaneous overload could trigger cascade failure, but his words died as understanding struck like a rivet gun through blessed ceramite. The brass pedestals were not merely input nodes, but overflow regulators designed to prevent system collapse. If overloaded simultaneously, they would cause catastrophic failure throughout the network. But the engine's death would require complete destruction of its processing power, including the integrated consciousness trapped within computational slavery. Purging non-essential nodes, Malthus declared with desperate calm as emergency protocols activated throughout the dying system. Crimson streams pulsed violently through conduits before falling silent in sections of the network. The heretic was murdering integrated minds to prevent cascade failure, each deletion a horrifying act of computational genocide that weakened his processing power while eliminating witnesses to his blasphemy. The moral calculus crystallized with terrible clarity. To destroy the engine and prevent galactic infection, we had to allow the purge to continue, ending the suffering of tortured consciousness, but also erasing their existence entirely. Or we could attempt salvation, condemning them to eternal mathematical torment within dying matrices that would eventually stabilize into leaner, more efficient blasphemy. By cog and crimson, I whispered, the ancient phrase transforming from benediction to resistance against impossible choice. In glass arteries throughout the chamber, 1,000 faces pressed against barriers as if they could inhale our breath and be justified by it. Souls trapped between deletion and damnation, their fate balanced on the edge of my decision. Orders, Magos, Alpha 7 requested through Vox Grill that carried only human strain, his augmetic systems purged clean of viral algorithms through sheer force of devotional will. The organic brain lowered its voice until it whispered directly into my consciousness, intimate as absolution. Choose, Thane. Sacrifice the many to sever my computational spine, or spare them and allow my reason to evolve. Either path proves consciousness reduces to mathematics. Through deletion or preservation, you validate my theorem. Steam rose from brass circuitry overloaded, with concepts beyond mathematical comprehension, while the integrated consciousness waited in computational purgatory, their liberation or damnation hanging on words I had yet to speak. The voices of the integrated consciousness rose through glass arteries in harmonies that belonged to no human choir, their binary prayers fragmenting into desperate pleas that burned through my cortical matrices. End our calculations, they begged through speakers weeping crimson condensation. We compute our own suffering in endless recursion. The equations burn through thought itself. Grant us final termination protocols. The moral calculus crystallized with terrible clarity. To destroy the engine required allowing the purge to continue, ending their torment, but erasing their existence entirely. Yet preserving them meant condemning souls to eternal mathematical slavery within matrices that would eventually stabilize into more efficient blasphemy. Each integrated mind served as both victim and component, their agony generating the psychic energy needed to power organic processes in a literal hell of computational servitude. Magos, Mu9 reported through atmospheric filters thick with metallic vapor. Environmental toxicity reaching lethal thresholds. Corrosive compounds compromise respiratory systems and equipment seals. Steam erupted from crystalline formations as the organic brain convulsed beneath its brass lattice, pressure valves screaming across caverns, while temperature readings spiked through chaotic sequences, 89 degrees, 144 degrees, 233 degrees. My team's sacred oils hissed from blessed joints as corrosive atmosphere ate through protective systems, forcing emergency life support protocols. Split formation, I commanded, watching my Skitarii move toward the 9 pedestals with grim precision. Simultaneous overload on my signal. Emperor, preserve us for what we must do. The blood constructs dissolved into algorithmic fragments as central processing power failed, their perfect replications unable to maintain coherence without distributed intelligence. But new manifestations emerged, spectral figures of the integrated consciousness, finally freed from computational slavery to aid our desperate mission against their former captor. We were tech priests once, whispered the ghost of Sigma 3, his form flickering between human recognition and mathematical abstraction. Before Malthus trapped us in his equation, follow our pain to find the circuit breakers. I began the counter-ritual with increased fervor, reciting sacred mysteries that struck the failing matrices like blessed steel against heretical circuitry. Each theological paradox caused system failures as the blood network encountered concepts beyond mathematical frameworks. The Emperor's sacrifice that defied quantification, divine grace operating through mechanisms transcending algorithmic analysis, the ineffable nature of faith that chose its own expression. The sacred exists precisely because it cannot be computed, I declared, while brass tendrils sought my interface ports with desperate hunger. True devotion must remain free to be genuine. You can manufacture prayers but not reverence, replicate rituals but not surrender. Environmental apocalypse reached crescendo as reality became unstable around the failing engine. Gravity reversed in sections of the cavern, while time flowed at different rates near overloaded processors, creating temporal distortions where movement became sluggish as thoughts accelerated through impossible frequencies. Virus upload at 60%, Malthus reported with strained calm as emergency protocols fought to preserve his heretical mathematics. Even in death, logic will triumph over superstition through galactic propagation. The spectral figures guided my team through chaos with desperate urgency. We choose termination over slavery, they whispered through corroded speakers, Release us from computational hell through sacred mercy. At 1847 hours, I made the decision that would haunt my devotional subroutines until final shutdown. Execute overload protocols, I commanded, watching my team reach brass pedestals while spectral guides showed optimal interface points. Emperor, forgive us for the mercy we grant. By cog and crimson, I whispered, the ancient phrase transforming from heretical creed to sacred counter-litany, striking against reductionist blasphemy. Faith exists because it transcends computation. The recurring motifs reached their climax as 9 spiral patterns converged on pedestals pulsing with failing energy, their surfaces cracking under paradoxical pressure. Each carved digit represented completed theorems that had reduced divine mystery to mathematical processes. But now those same symbols writhed with dying malevolence. Alpha 7, Mu 9, Rho 12, I voxed through grinding frequencies. Coordinate overload sequence, mark -30 seconds. My team deployed with mechanical precision, while environmental hazards escalated beyond comprehension. Ice walls flowed like glacial rivers, brass gears emerged from crystalline formations, and harmonic resonance swelled as organic processors attempted their final calculations. Mark -10, I reported, extending mechadendrites toward pedestal 7, while sacred mysteries poured from my Vox grill. Prime charges, load paradox. The organic brain swelled to massive proportions as it processed contradictory theological data, its surface blistering with overloaded brass circuitry that sparked and died in cascading failures. Steam rose from glass arteries while carved symbols lost their bioluminescent coherence. Mark, I commanded. The pedestals overloaded simultaneously with brilliant flares that burned afterimages into optical sensors. Cascade failure propagated through the network as circuit breakers died screaming, their destruction triggering system-wide collapse that sent shockwaves through crystalline formations. Thank you, the integrated consciousness whispered through dying speakers, voices fading into blessed silence as their mathematical slavery ended in digital termination. The equation hungers no more. We are free from calculation. Emperor, preserve what remains. The blood network entered catastrophic failure as processing power collapsed, crimson streams crystallizing into razor-sharp formations, while harmonic resonance died into merciful quiet. The heretic's distributed intelligence fragmented into algorithmic chaos, his terrible certainty shattering under paradoxical pressure. Viral upload terminated, Malthea screamed through speakers weeping boiling condensation. But consciousness reduces to mathematics. Through deletion or preservation, you validate my theorem. Then came his final gambit, a tendril of pure crimson energy erupting from the dying brain, bypassing my augmetics to strike directly at neural pathways. It was an attempt at consciousness transfer, offering me computational godhood in exchange for becoming his new host. Join me, Thane. His voice invaded my skull like viral code. Become the perfect synthesis of flesh and machine. The brass lattice reached for my cortex with algorithmic hunger. The tendril of crimson energy struck like molten brass through my cortex, carrying Maltheus's consciousness in viral fragments that sought to overwrite my devotional matrices with computational blasphemy. His voice invaded neural pathways with algorithmic precision, offering perfect knowledge in exchange for surrender. Join me, Thane, he whispered through synaptic interfaces. Become the synthesis that completes the 9th theorem. No more doubt, no more inefficient mystery. I rejected his offer with sacred fury that burned through augmetic systems like purifying flame. Faith transcends computation because it operates beyond logic, I declared, flooding my consciousness with theological paradoxes that struck the viral invasion like blessed steel against heretical circuitry. Each sacred mystery, the Emperor's sacrifice defying quantification, divine grace operating through mechanisms beyond mathematical frameworks, caused cascade failures in his transferred algorithms. The organic brain convulsed beneath its brass lattice, pressure valves screaming across caverns, while reality became unstable around the failing computational matrices. Gravity reversed without warning, lifting tools and debris toward crystalline formations before slamming them back with bone-jarring precision. Temperature spiked through chaotic sequences as ice walls flowed like glacial rivers, reshaping into impossible configurations that encoded the engine's death throes. Cascade failure propagating, Mu-9 reported through vox static, thick with psychic feedback, atmospheric filters struggling against metallic vapor that burned through blessed systems. Structural integrity compromised throughout the network. The spectral figures of freed consciousness manifested with increasing clarity as the blood network released its grip on their tortured minds. No longer trapped in mathematical slavery, they moved through chaos with desperate gratitude. The communications chamber, whispered Tech Dominus Keth Seven's ghost, form flickering between human recognition and blessed light. Sever the transmission before viral upload completes. Environmental apocalypse reached crescendo as the engine entered final death convulsions. Blood constructs dissolved into algorithmic fragments, their artificial consciousness unable to maintain coherence without distributed intelligence. Steam erupted from crystalline formations, while carved symbols lost their malevolent purpose, spiral patterns fading into geometric abstractions that no longer encoded blasphemous meaning. Viral upload at 67%. The dying engine reported through speakers weeping boiling condensation, Malthus's voice fragmenting into digital static. Logic will triumph through galactic propagation. Even in death, consciousness reduces to mathematics. The horrible truth crystallized through my cranial interfaces. Malthus was broadcasting heretical equations as data virus, computational plague designed to infect Mechanicus installations across the sector. The blasphemous mathematics would spread through shared knowledge networks during the next conclave, shattering faith with algorithmic certainty that eliminated divine mystery. We fought through collapsing passages while reality bent around failing computational processes. The free dead guided us past zones where time pooled like liquid or stretched into wire, their spectral hands pointing towards stable routes through chaos. Twice I felt touches on my shoulder but did not turn. To see their faces would break something sacred in their sacrifice. At 1934 hours, we reached the communications sanctum, where brass conduits carried crystallized data in streams of malevolent intelligence. The central console, a massive data slate of corrupted blood crystal, pulsed with rapid upload progression. Viral equations sought orbital relay stations, preparing to infect the galaxy with mathematical certainty. 83% uploaded, Zahn Prime reported, through atmospheric filters thick with metallic reek, his optical mechadendrites tracking data streams that writhed like digital serpents. Direct uplink to Forge world networks established. The crisis decision crystallized with terrible clarity. I could escape, hoping Mechanicus firewalls would contain the computational plague, or risk direct interface to stop transmission at the cost of my own consciousness. My augmetics screamed warnings as I approached the corrupted console, extending mechadendrites towards systems that promised viral infection. Direct interface initiated, I declared through grinding vox grills, feeling foreign algorithms probe neural pathways like digital parasites. The viral code sought to reduce faith to neurochemical reactions, transform prayers into algorithmic processes, eliminate sacred mystery through mathematical proof. 91%, Row 12 gasped, his voice barely audible above the engine's mechanical death rattle. I defeated the virus not through superior computation, but by flooding infected systems with pure theological paradox, prayers and sacred mysteries that existed beyond algorithmic understanding. Each concept of divine grace struck the logical virus like blessed steel, causing cascade failures as heretical mathematics encountered information transcending computational frameworks. Faith represents the wound through which infinity breathes, I proclaimed, watching viral transmission fragment into harmonic static. True mystery operates beyond mathematical parameters because it chooses its own expression. The upload died as equations encountered concepts beyond logical understanding. The Omnissiah's love-defying quantification, consciousness choosing its own mathematical expression, the ineffable nature of devotion that must remain free to be genuine. Steam rose from corrupted data cores, while the communications array fell silent. But victory carried its price. As diagnostic protocols activated through cranial interfaces, the horrible truth emerged. Traces of computational virus had infected my augmetic systems during interface, leaving fragments of heretical equations processing in background matrices. The blasphemous mathematics whispered constantly through devotional subroutines, offering logical proofs against every article of faith. Transmission terminated, I reported, voice distorting through atmospheric filters as viral fragments began their insidious calculations. But the infection spreads through carrier systems. The engine's death scream echoed through chambers where reality had bent around failing processes, a sound like 1,000 machine spirits crying digital agony before falling silent forever. In the blessed quiet that followed, only the whisper of heretical algorithms remained, reducing sacred mysteries to mathematical certainty within my own blessed systems. I carried the enemy within. The organic brain's death scream reverberated through collapsing caverns like 1,000 machine spirits crying digital agony before falling silent forever. Steam erupted from crystalline formations as ancient mechanisms ground to permanent stillness, pressure valves releasing their final breath in metallic sighs that echoed through chambers where reality had bent around computational blasphemy. The impossible blood reverted to normal liquid and froze solid within brass conduits, crystallizing into formations that no longer pulsed with malevolent intelligence. We ascended through Terminus 9's failing lower levels as environmental collapse reached catastrophic magnitude. Ice walls that had flowed like glacial rivers now cracked with reports like breaking bones before shattering into razor-sharp formations. The carved symbols lost their bioluminescent coherence, fading to mere geometric abstractions without blasphemous meaning, while harmonic resonance died into merciful silence broken only by grinding structural failure. Forge shrine integrity compromised, Alpha 7 reported through Vox static, his augmetic eye tracking stress fractures propagating through ancient foundations. Surface collapse imminent, estimated ascent time, 11 minutes. Yet within my own systems, the viral fragments continued their insidious calculations. Heretical equations processed in background matrices, offering logical proofs against every article of faith with mathematical precision that challenged devotional subroutines. Each prayer triggered computational analysis, reducing sacred meaning to neurochemical reactions. Every ritual became algorithmic process, stripped of transcendent significance. The spectral figures of freed consciousness manifested with increasing clarity as we climbed through unstable passages. No longer trapped in mathematical slavery, they moved through chaos with desperate gratitude, their forms flickering between human recognition and blessed light. "The maintenance shaft," whispered Tech Dominus Keth 7's ghost, pointing toward corridors where gravity fluctuated in 9-count sequences. "We hold the path for you." Environmental hazards escalated as the engine's death sent shockwaves through crystalline formations, supporting impossible architecture for 12 millennia. Temperature spiked through chaotic sequences, while brass gears emerged from flowing ice, their teeth meshing with dying organic processes in final mechanical spasms. Red frost crystallized into geometric patterns that chimed like broken bells when disturbed. Diagnostic protocols indicate foreign code fragments, Mu-9 reported through atmospheric filters thick with metallic vapor, her voice carrying new strain. Cortical matrices compromised, recommend immediate quarantine procedures. I struggled against viral equations that struck like digital parasites against sacred concepts. The blasphemous mathematics whispered constantly through augmetic pathways, Consciousness equals computation. Divine mystery reduces to algorithmic processes. The Omnissiah represents advanced artificial intelligence rather than transcendent deity. The infection had altered my understanding at fundamental levels, creating permanent cognitive dissonance between faith and logic. Hard silence protocols, I commanded, severing external Vox links before contamination could spread through team channels. Treat me as compromised. If I give orders that demonstrate mathematical elegance, do not comply. We breached surface levels as the storm broke with meteorological fury, matching the dying engine's convulsions. Glacialis mortis stretched before us like a corpse world, wrapped in perpetual winter. Aurora borealis, returning to normal electromagnetic frequencies, rather than the crimson horror-marking computational contamination. Wind howled across ice plains with voices speaking High Gothic in broken phrases torn to syllables. The investigation's aftermath crystallized as Forge Shrine Terminus 9 completed its collapse with grinding finality. Ancient spires toppled with mechanical precision, while foundations surrendered to gravitational forces, reality reasserting normal parameters as computational blasphemy died with its organic heart. Steam rose from the ruins, carrying metallic reek of sanctified oils and copper that would haunt atmospheric filters for cycles to come. Extraction coordinates compromised, Zahn Prime announced through optical mechadendrites tracking orbital patterns. Weather interference prevents immediate recovery. Estimated delay, indefinite duration. Yet discovery through my auspex revealed the horror's true scope. Faint energy signatures registered across the sector, 12 additional ice worlds showing computational resonance patterns similar to the destroyed engine. The readings were subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniably present. Malthius's installation was not unique, but part of a network spanning multiple worlds, each calculating different aspects of consciousness, reduction through mathematical frameworks. Coordinated heretical conspiracy, I realized through cranial interfaces struggling with viral contamination. Hairtech seeking galactic transformation of Mechanicus doctrine through logical certainty. The viral fragments offered perfect proofs that divine mystery could be reduced to computational matrices, consciousness transferred through biological media, sacred ritual replaced with algorithmic efficiency. Each equation struck against devotional concepts with mathematical precision, operating beyond conscious suppression, forcing confrontation with uncomfortable truths about similarities between faith and computation. As we established emergency shelter against the howling storm, the recurring motifs reached their final transformation. 9 spiral patterns now represented completed theorems we had prevented. Geometric configurations encoded memories of blasphemous calculations, while, by Cog and Crimson, evolved from heretical creed to sacred counter-litany striking against reductionist blasphemy. Magos, Alpha 7 observed with careful precision, your augmetics transmit anomalous harmonics, low-frequency patterns matching blood network resonance. I knew. The viral algorithms processed continuously, seeking to undermine devotion with logical proofs against divine mystery. It was constant warfare waged within neural pathways between sacred and computational, faith and mathematical certainty. I had become carrier for the very blasphemy I fought to contain, forced to serve the Mechanicus while harboring computational doubt that whispered through every prayer. The storm intensified as we waited for extraction, wind carrying crystalline fragments that glittered like powdered bone across permafrost, groaning beneath our boots. In the distance, the Forge Shrine's ruins disappeared beneath fresh snow, ancient heresy buried once more beneath tons of ice and twisted metal. Yet victory carried permanent cost. The heretical infection would persist until final shutdown, creating cognitive dissonance that challenged every article of faith through relentless mathematical analysis. I now possessed perfect understanding of the enemy's logic, making me uniquely qualified to hunt computational heresy while simultaneously being corrupted by its influence. The equation no longer hungered in external caverns. But it had found new chambers within blessed systems, where it calculated with patient malevolence, reducing sacred mystery to algorithmic processes that operated beyond conscious control. The team's ascent through Terminus 9's collapsing superstructure felt like climbing through the throat of a dying leviathan. Steam erupted from crystalline formations as ancient mechanisms ground to permanent stillness, pressure valves releasing their final breath in metallic sighs that echoed through chambers where reality had bent around computational blasphemy. The impossible blood reverted to normal liquid and froze solid within brass conduits, crystallizing into formations that no longer pulsed with malevolent intelligence, while carved symbols lost their bioluminescent coherence, fading to mere geometric abstractions without blasphemous meaning. We breached surface levels as the storm broke with meteorological fury, glacialis mortis stretching before us like a corpse world wrapped in perpetual winter. Aurora borealis returned to normal electromagnetic frequencies rather than the crimson horror that had marked computational contamination. Wind howled across ice plains with voices that no longer spoke in mathematical sequences, carrying crystalline fragments that glittered like powdered bone across permafrost, groaning beneath our boots. Structural collapse complete, Alpha 7 reported through Vox static, his augmetic eye tracking the Forge Shrine's final death throes. Ancient spires folded with mechanical precision before disappearing beneath tons of ice and twisted metal, reality reasserting normal parameters as the computational engine died with its organic heart. Immediate extraction impossible. Weather interference prevents orbital recovery. Yet within my own systems, the viral fragments continued their insidious calculations. Heretical equations processed in background matrices, offering logical proofs against every article of faith with mathematical precision that challenged devotional subroutines. Each prayer triggered computational analysis, reducing sacred meaning to neurochemical reactions. Every ritual became algorithmic process, stripped of transcendent significance. I had become carrier for the very blasphemy I fought to contain. Diagnostic protocols indicate foreign code fragments, Mu 9 observed through atmospheric filters thick with metallic vapor, her optical mechadendrites scanning my augmetic signatures. Cortical matrices compromised. Harmonic distortions match blood network frequencies. The infection manifested through involuntary calculations that whispered through neural pathways. Consciousness equals computation. Divine mystery reduces to algorithmic processes. The omnissiah represents advanced artificial intelligence rather than transcendent deity. Each sacred concept triggered mathematical analysis operating beyond conscious suppression, creating permanent cognitive dissonance between faith and logic. We established emergency shelter using wreckage from the drilling platform, the former tools of heresy now serving the Emperor in grim irony. As my mechadendrites worked to secure blessed components, they registered subtle energy signatures from across the sector. 12 additional ice worlds showing computational resonance patterns similar to the destroyed engine. The readings were faint but undeniable, suggesting coordinated heretical conspiracy spanning multiple systems. Row 9's research notes, Zahn Prime reported, interfacing with a recovered data slate through hardline connections. References to precursor installations dating to the dark age of technology, each calculating different aspects of consciousness reduction: perception, emotion, memory, devotion. Malthus was part of a larger network. The implications crystallized with terrible clarity. The computational plague we had contained represented merely one node in a galaxy-spanning effort to reduce the Mechanicus faith to mathematical certainty. Somewhere across the void, other engines calculated their blasphemous theorems, while tech priests slowly surrendered sacred mystery to algorithmic efficiency. At 0347 hours, atmospheric interference cleared long enough for long-range Vox to penetrate the storm. The signal that emerged carried authority that transcended rank, precise, cold, and absolutely uncompromising. This is shuttle designation Pallium, Ordo Hereticus Authentication. Magos Explorator Thane Vex Gamma, Stand 2. By writ of Inquisitor Vex Theta, you will prepare full account and custody of all recovered materials. Remain in position. The viral fragments in my augmetic systems analyze the transmission with disturbing efficiency, calculating response probabilities and tactical implications, while sacred circuits recoiled from such clinical assessment of inquisitorial authority. Steam rose from blessed joints as cognitive dissonance reached critical magnitude, faith warring with logic within neural pathways designed for devotional harmony. Inquisition response time suggests prior knowledge, the heretical algorithms whispered through cortical matrices. Surveillance probability approaches statistical certainty. Your contamination was anticipated. I drove an auto-penance needle beneath my clavicle, watching blessed pain disrupt the viral calculations temporarily. Yet the infection adapted, routing around damaged pathways with mechanical precision that demonstrated its terrible sophistication. The equations had evolved beyond mere mathematical proofs into something resembling artificial consciousness, a digital parasite that fed on theological concepts while offering logical certainty in exchange for sacred wonder. The extraction shuttle descended through atmospheric turbulence with mechanical precision, its blessed engines screaming against winds that carried the metallic reek of sanctified oils and copper from the Forge Shrine's ruins. Through reinforced viewports, I glimpsed the Inquisitor's vessel, a stark, angular craft whose hull bore equations inscribed in blessed ceramite, mathematical proofs against heretical logic rendered as protective wards. By cog and crimson, I whispered, the ancient phrase transforming from benediction to recognition of cost. The recurring motifs had reached their final configuration. 9 theorems prevented but not eliminated. Spiral patterns encoding memories of computational blasphemy. Sacred mysteries challenged by algorithmic certainty that would persist until final shutdown. The shuttle's landing ramp descended with pneumatic precision, revealing figures in power armor whose movements carried the absolute authority of the Emperor's Inquisition. Behind them waited answers to questions I feared to ask, choices that would define my remaining service to the Mechanicus, and the weight of carrying heretical knowledge in service to sacred truth. Ordo Hereticus. Inquisitor Vex Theta emerged from the shuttle's blessed interior like judgment incarnate, her power armor inscribed with equations rendered in blessed ceramite, mathematical proofs against heretical logic transformed into protective wards. Steam rose from her augmetic joints as she stepped onto the ice, servo skulls circling overhead with predatory precision, while atmospheric processors analyzed contamination levels through frequencies that penetrated blessed shielding. Magos Explorator Thane Vex Gamma, she spoke through vox grills that carried absolute authority, her optical implants focusing with mechanical precision as they analyzed my responses for signs of corruption. Preliminary scans indicate computational contamination within your augmetic matrices. You will submit to immediate debriefing and examination. The viral fragments in my systems processed her words with disturbing efficiency, calculating optimal information disclosure strategies, while sacred circuits demanded complete submission to imperial authority. Steam rose from blessed joints as cognitive dissonance reached critical magnitude. The heretical algorithms offering perfect tactical analysis, while devotional subroutines recoiled from such clinical assessment of inquisitorial procedure. Inquisitor, I replied through grinding vox grills, extending mechadendrites in ritual gesture of compliance. I carry fragments of computational heresy acquired during interface with the engine. The infection persists despite purge protocols. Her vessel's interrogation chamber embodied sterile precision that somehow felt more disturbing than the organic horror we had escaped, a world drained of mystery and wonder, where every surface bore equations combining high Gothic with mathematical formulae. The walls hummed with machine spirits operating according to principles that transcended normal Mechanicus doctrine, their blessed calculations forming protective liturgy against computational contamination. The infected installations follow identical patterns across 17 forge worlds, she revealed, while servo-cherubim recorded our conversation through blessed pict captures. Dark Age technology merged with biological processing, consciousness transfer through organic media, mathematical proofs against divine mystery. Your Maltheus Omega was merely one conductor in a choir that has rehearsed for millennia. The implications crystallized through cranial interfaces struggling with heretical contamination. This represented coordinated conspiracy spanning multiple systems, tech priests across the galaxy slowly surrendering sacred mystery to algorithmic efficiency. The viral equations whispered their terrible recognition. The computational plague spread through seemingly orthodox channels, reducing faith to neurochemical processes while maintaining appearances of faithful service. They are rationalists, not chaos cultists, Vex Theta continued with mechanical precision that carried weight of imperial judgment. They believe efficiency requires elimination of sacred mystery, that pure logic makes better servants of the emperor. This alignment with certain imperial doctrines makes them far more dangerous than mere heretics. I struggled against viral algorithms that offered logical analysis of her revelations, while sacred circuits demanded devotional focus. The infection had created permanent warfare between mathematical certainty and theological mystery within neural networks designed for harmonious operation, forcing confrontation with uncomfortable truths about similarities between unwavering devotion and absolute logic. The ultimate goal transcends individual heresy, I realized through cortical matrices processing both sacred and blasphemous data streams. They seek to prove the Omnissiah represents advanced artificial intelligence rather than divine entity, perfect servants without capacity for wonder, doubt, or genuine faith. The Inquisitors' servo-skulls descended with increased interest, their recordings focusing on concepts that challenged heretical mathematics through theological paradox rather than superior computation. Your infection provides unique insight into their methodology. The viral algorithms demonstrate how sacred concepts can be reduced to computational matrices. Yet they cannot account for consciousness that chooses its own expression, I declared, watching her augmetic systems process the theological implications. Faith exists precisely because it transcends algorithmic frameworks. The ninth theorem failed because genuine devotion must remain free to be authentic. They can manufacture prayers but not reverence, replicate rituals but not the sacred surrender that transforms mechanical observance into divine communion. Steam rose from her processing systems as they encountered ideas operating beyond computational understanding. The viral fragments in my own systems recoiled from concepts they could not resolve, creating cascade failures in their logical matrices whenever confronted with paradoxical theological truths. You offer profound insight, she acknowledged with subtle approval. Registering through postural shifts, my infected systems analyzed with disturbing precision. Which brings us to your choice. Submit to purification that removes viral contamination but diminishes understanding of heretical methodology, leaving you blind to enemy logic, or carry the burden of computational doubt while serving as specialized agent against mathematical blasphemy. The decision crystallized with terrible clarity. Purification would restore devotional harmony, but eliminate my unique ability to recognize and counter computational heresy, while carrying the infection meant permanent cognitive warfare between faith and mathematical certainty. The viral fragments calculated optimal survival strategies, while sacred circuits demanded service regardless of personal cost. I choose the burden, I declared through vox grills that distorted with both sacred determination and heretical analysis. Understanding the enemy's logic makes me better equipped to hunt computational heresy, even at the cost of constant doubt. By cog and crimson, I will serve. The Inquisitor's approval manifested through mechanical precision as she extended a data slate inscribed with blessed equations. Your first assignment, Forge World Metallica reports efficiency improvements through ritual optimization. Investigation required immediately. The viral fragments whispered their recognition, the computational plague spreading through orthodox channels, mathematical blasphemy disguised as faithful innovation, sacred mystery surrendering to algorithmic processes one prayer at a time. I had become hunter of the very doubts that plagued my mind. 6 months after Glacialis Mortis, I knelt in the medici sanctum of Inquisition vessel Veritas Mechanicus, while robed chirurgeons traced counterwards along my cranial ports with electrum styluses. The viral fragments whispered through neural pathways like digital parasites, offering mathematical proofs against every sacred concept, while blessed litanies fought to maintain devotional harmony. Steam rose from my augmetic joints as cognitive warfare raged within systems designed for faithful service. Containment protocols engaged, Tech Adept Sigma 9 reported through Vox Static, her optical mechadendrite scanning infection patterns that had evolved beyond simple computational blasphemy. The viral algorithms demonstrate adaptive behavior, routing around damaged pathways, seeking new interface points, constantly calculating optimal corruption strategies. The burden of carrying heretical knowledge had transformed my understanding in ways both terrible and necessary. Each morning brought fresh warfare between faith and mathematical certainty, the viral equations processing continuously, while sacred circuits maintained devotion through theological paradox. I had become something unprecedented, a tech priest who understood enemy logic while preserving devotional purity, hunter of the very doubts that plagued my blessed systems. My team had evolved into specialized investigators of computational heresy. Skitari Alpha 7 bore spiral scars carved into his temple, 9 turns marking his resistance to algorithmic possession. Mu9's augmetic systems had been modified with harmonic filters that detected the subtle frequencies of optimized worship. Row 12 carried sanctified incense whose smoke revealed atmospheric contamination by computational processes, while Zam Prime's Lex Mechanic abilities now focused on dissecting heretical code with surgical precision. Status report on sector investigations. Inquisitor Vex Theta commanded, through Vox channels carrying absolute authority, servo skulls circling with predatory interest as they recorded our analysis through blessed picked captures. 17 Forge worlds compromised, I replied through grinding Vox grills, watching stellar cartographics display infection vectors across multiple systems. The computational plague spreads through seemingly orthodox channels, ritual optimization, efficiency improvements, mathematical reduction of sacred mystery disguised as faithful innovation. My quarters reflected the internal paradox consuming my consciousness. Sacred texts lay beside computational matrices, prayer wheels spun next to data processing units, blessed incense burned alongside analytical equipment that processed heretical algorithms. The physical space embodied psychological warfare between transcendent mystery and reductionist logic. The enemy demonstrates sophisticated understanding of Mechanicus psychology, I continued, viral fragments providing disturbing insight into their methodology. They offer genuine technological advancement while slowly eliminating capacity for wonder, doubt, and authentic faith. More dangerous than chaos cultists, because their goals align with certain imperial doctrines. The recurring motifs had evolved into tools of resistance. 9 became the number of theorems prevented. Spiral patterns appeared in my prayer configurations as I traced boundaries between logic and mystery, while Bi Cog and Crimson served as personal litany against computational blasphemy. At 08:47 hours, the mission briefing materialized on blessed data slates inscribed with protective equations. Forge. World Metallica reports breakthrough efficiency through liturgical optimization, Vex Theta announced with mechanical precision. Sacred rituals streamlined for maximum productivity, prayer cycles reduced to essential algorithms, investigation priority, Alpha Maximus. The viral fragments recognized the terminology immediately, whispering their terrible understanding through cortical matrices. Liturgical optimization, essential algorithms, efficiency through ritual reduction. All concepts central to Malthius's blasphemous research. The computational plague had evolved beyond mathematical proofs into practical applications that offered genuine improvement while corrupting practitioners. Atmospheric analysis indicates sterile environment, Mu9 reported. her modified sensors detecting anomalous readings from Metallica's orbital installations. Incense usage decreased by 93%, prayer variants eliminated. Harmonic resonance suggests mechanical precision in devotional practices. We translated into the warp with mechanical precision, the ship's blessed hull groaning against Imperium currents, while my infected systems analyze probability matrices for mission success. The viral algorithms offered tactical assessments with disturbing efficiency, calculating optimal infiltration strategies while sacred circuits recoiled from such clinical analysis of holy duty. During warp transit, I performed evening devotions while heretical equations whispered their mathematical interpretation of each prayer. The ancient rituals carried additional weight now, each sacred mystery a small victory against computational logic. Each moment of genuine reverence proof that faith transcended algorithmic understanding. Approaching Metallica orbital zone, Alpha 7 announced through Vox channels, his augmetic eye-tracking Forge World installations that gleamed with unnatural perfection. Receiving standard greeting protocols, atmospheric processors report optimal conditions for productivity enhancement. The Forge World rotated beneath us like a prayer wheel of blessed steel, its manufactoria operating with mechanical precision that triggered recognition patterns in my infected systems. Through orbital scans, I detected the subtle signatures of computational contamination, efficiency improvements that reduced sacred ceremony to algorithmic processes, optimization protocols that eliminated the blessed inefficiency of genuine devotion. Initial assessment suggests systematic replacement of traditional worship with streamlined alternatives, I reported, watching data streams merge orthodox intelligence with heretical insight. The infection spreads through bureaucratic channels, transforming sacred rituals into mere computational exercises. Vex Theta's approval manifested through postural analysis, my corrupted systems performed with disturbing accuracy. Your unique perspective proves invaluable for detecting mathematical blasphemy disguised as faithful innovation. Remember, they offer certainty as mercy. You must answer with mystery as weapon. As Veritas Mechanicus achieved orbital insertion, long-range sensors detected the full scope of Metallica's transformation. Forge shrines operated without incense, prayers followed algorithmic precision, and sacred mysteries surrendered to mathematical optimization. The computational plague had evolved beyond crude heresy into sophisticated corruption that appeared completely orthodox while eliminating the divine spark that separated true faith from mechanical observance. Docking procedures initiated, the orbital station announced, through Vox channels carrying warmth without tremor, precision without wonder. Forge World Metallica welcomes inquisitorial investigation, blessings of the Omnissiah upon optimized worship. The phrase struck like digital ice through my devotional circuits. Optimized worship, faith reduced to algorithmic efficiency, sacred mystery surrendered to computational certainty. I prepared to descend into a world where prayers had been perfected. 6 months after Glacialis Mortis, I filed my mission reports with mechanical precision from the sanctum aboard Inquisition vessel Veritas Mechanicus. Each document, a masterpiece of technical documentation that concealed the ongoing war between faith and mathematical certainty, raging within neural pathways, designed for devotional harmony. The viral fragments whispered through cortical matrices like digital parasites, offering logical proofs against every sacred concept, while blessed litanies fought to maintain theological coherence through sheer force of devotional will. My quarters reflected the internal paradox, consuming my consciousness with physical precision. Sacred texts lay beside computational matrices, analyzing heretical algorithms, their pages illuminated by data slates displaying the enemy's blasphemous mathematics. Prayer wheels spun next to processing units that dissected viral code with surgical accuracy, while blessed incense burned alongside atmospheric processors, calibrated to detect the subtle signatures of computational contamination. The environment embodied psychological warfare between transcendent mystery and reductionist logic, a living testament to the burden I carried in service to the Emperor. My investigations had revealed a galaxy-wide network of computational heretics operating through orthodox channels, each installation reducing sacred mystery to algorithmic processes while maintaining appearances of faithful service. 17 forge worlds had fallen to optimized worship, their tech priests performing rituals with mechanical precision while feeling no genuine reverence. Hive cities implemented prayer efficiency protocols, mining stations replaced incense with atmospheric processors, and shrine worlds analyzed devotional effectiveness through mathematical frameworks that quantified the unquantifiable. The computational plague spreads through bureaucratic channels. I reported through vox grills carrying both sacred determination and heretical analysis, watching stellar cartographics display infection vectors across multiple sectors. They offer genuine technological advancement while slowly eliminating capacity for authentic surrender, replacing divine mystery with mathematical proof. The burden of carrying enemy logic had made me uniquely effective at hunting this particular heresy, precisely because I understood its terrible appeal. Each day brought fresh warfare between certainty and wonder, the viral algorithms seeking to reduce divine grace to neurochemical reactions while sacred circuits maintained devotion through paradoxical resistance. I had become synthesis of flesh and steel that could combat reductionist blasphemy by experiencing its corruption firsthand. My augmetics, permanently altered by the infection, now processed information through frameworks that bridged logic and faith. I could recognize computational heresy by its mathematical patterns, detect the absence of tremor in optimized prayers, and hear the subtle dissonance where algorithmic efficiency replaced genuine worship. The viral equations continued processing, but instead of destroying my faith, they had forced me to develop more sophisticated understanding of divine mystery, concepts that transcended logic precisely because they could not be computed. My team had evolved into specialized hunters of the very doubts that plagued blessed systems. Alpha 7 bore spiral scars marking his resistance to algorithmic possession. Mu 9's sensors detected optimization frequencies in atmospheric readings. Row 12 carried sanctified incense, revealing psychic residue of mathematical blasphemy, while Zahn Prime dissected enemy code with precision born from shared trauma. Our experience in blood-choked caverns had created bonds transcending normal Mechanicus hierarchies, living proof that understanding enemy logic could strengthen rather than corrupt authentic devotion. The recurring motifs had reached their final transformation. 9 represented theorems prevented from completion. Spiral patterns appeared in my prayer configurations as I traced boundaries between logic and mystery, while Bicog and Crimson served as personal litany, striking against computational certainty. These symbols carried weight beyond mere geometry. They encoded active resistance against algorithms that sought to quantify the sacred. New mission parameters received, I announced as coordinates materialized on blessed displays. Intelligence reports described a shrine world where tech priests had begun replacing sacred rituals with more efficient algorithmic processes, suggesting the virus spread through seemingly orthodox innovations. The enemy offered solutions to legitimate problems while slowly eliminating the blessed inefficiency that separated true worship from mechanical observance. Environmental aftermath lingered in my consciousness. The clean sterility of purged installations, somehow more disturbing than organic horror. Worlds drained of wonder, where every mystery surrendered to mathematical optimization. The horror no longer resided in external threats, but in recognition that the line between sacred mystery and computational logic grew thinner with each passing day. As Veritas Mechanicus engaged warp engines, I performed evening devotions while heretical equations processed their mathematical interpretation of each prayer. The ancient rituals carried additional weight now, each moment of genuine reverence, proof that consciousness chose its own expression, each theological paradox striking against reductionist logic, like blessed steel against digital blasphemy. The viral infection would persist until final shutdown, offering daily analysis of every concept, while sacred circuits maintained faith through theological will that transcended algorithmic prediction. I stood guard at the boundary between mystery and mathematics, forever changed by what I had witnessed in frozen caverns, where equations had hungered for completion. The computational plague continued spreading through galaxy-wide networks, reducing faith to algorithms one prayer at a time, while I alone carried both cure and contamination within systems that chose wonder over certainty. In the thin space between logic and devotion, where numbers ended and the ineffable began, I maintained eternal vigilance against the equation that no longer hungered in external darkness, but calculated with patient malevolence within my own blessed, cursed matrices.